Okay, members of UNA, foreign guests, distinguished members of the Bunge and Tanzania, colleagues. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and join you. I really do apologize for joining you this way. I was hoping to be there in person, but the union celebrations in the United Republic of Tanzania are tomorrow, so unfortunately I was not able to come personally. I'm particularly excited at this concept of Model UN because, in fact, I did this about 30 years ago when I was less young than now. But it makes me appreciate your interest and your commitment to development, to peace and security, to stopping climate change, to all of the good things that the UN is trying to promote. I would like to pay a special thanks to the UNA Executive Committee and very especially the UNA Secretariat for ensuring that events such as these ones actually take place. They are a real manifestation of the commitment of youth to work with the UN to work for development in this country and of course in other countries in which you have similar arrangements such as these. I would like to tell you that at the UN, to use a management term, we have an open door policy, so we do hope to remain in touch with you. I'm also very willing to entertain your emails, and if you have questions, I can get my team or even myself to respond to you if you have specific queries. That way we can have, I guess, a bit of a personal engagement in this era of social media. So I thought that before giving you maybe 2 or 3 substantive points, I would tell you a little bit about my background. Because of course from the Model UN experience 30 years ago, given where I am now as resident coordinator in Tanzania, I obviously pursued a UN career. In fact, for me it was a dream come true. And I had, of course, many challenges and many opportunities during my last 25 years with the United Nations. But in terms of the challenges and opportunities, I will just tell you a little bit about some of the countries that I served in, and you will be able to assess by yourselves. I would like to tell you a little bit about my background, so you will see maybe that this is the kind of career that you would like to follow in the years to come. I've had many challenges and opportunities. I started my work in Kenya 25 years ago. It was an exciting time. It was times of civil war in Sudan and the start of the civil war in Somalia. After that, I went to China, where I spent 4 years working on economic reform, when China was moving away from being a country that was known as being poor to becoming the kind of giant it is now in global economics. After that, I spent several years in Thailand, working on processes of change in Southeast Asia, in a regional portfolio. That was followed by several years working on policy issues in our headquarters. Interestingly enough, this was at the time in which the MDGs were established, so I had the opportunity to be part of that process. After that, I went to Pakistan, where I worked on the reconstruction following the earthquake in 2005, and of course many processes related to peace and security, as that country has been facing increasing tensions and insurgency. But based on that experience, I was asked to come to Somalia, a country that's been in the news recently, and I had the opportunity to work in all parts of Somalia on governance issues, on humanitarian response, and very, very significantly on the relief work related to the famine in 2011. And again, based on that experience, the UN asked me to go to Afghanistan, where I spent 2.5 years working on a number of very exciting areas in a country that many define as post-conflict, but where in fact there's still a lot of conflict. And after all of those very difficult times, I really feel blessed to be able to be in such a beautiful country such as Tanzania. So it's been an interesting career, a career that has had its challenges. I've seen people die of hunger. I've seen people die through attacks by terrorists. But I've also seen people that live because of the work of the UN. So it's that enthusiasm that you as youth should carry, irrespective of whether you follow a career in the UN. In any job you do, the values of the UN should be with you. But now in terms of some substantive themes that I thought that maybe I could highlight for you as you will start your deliberations tomorrow in this Model UN exercise. I think the first one is to highlight the importance of this year, 2015 is actually an extremely important year. It is the end of the MDGs and the finalization of the process of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. It is a year in which we define the post-2015 development agenda. And very, very important for all of us that care about the UN, it is the 70th anniversary of the UN. 7 decades of many successes, but some failures as well. So this is a year in which I believe that youth need to be active. The voices of youth need to be heard. You must engage in debates. You must read up on topics. And you must be able to make a positive contribution to your country, to your community, to humanity. In Tanzania specifically, it's also a year of presidential elections. So it is a year in which one must reflect the different agendas that are being put forward to the public and assess the pros and cons of different candidates and different party platforms. It is a time in which you, as youth, can help change or help shape the future of your country, of your community, and even humanity, as I mentioned. So think of this year as being a tremendously important year. It's a year that, at least developmentally and for the UN, will help define the next 15 years. Because the next 15 years are the years of the SDGs, the years of the post-2015 development agenda. But you must also be aware that youth can also be manipulated. You must be savvy, you must be intelligent, you must be wise in your judgment in terms of the choices that you make. Because there are also difficult issues that youth face in many countries. And we know, for example, that many youth get manipulated, sometimes even to join insurgencies, sometimes even to become suicide bombers, something that I saw in Afghanistan and in Somalia and even Pakistan. So you must also look after each other. You must be a peer group to each other to promote the best values of your culture, of your country, and of the UN. Now, why do we emphasize youth so much? Well, it's not only because you are young, and I'm young too. It's because youth are actually becoming a defining characteristic in Africa in the 21st century. There are more young people in Africa, there are more young people in Tanzania than ever before. This has to do with processes of improved health care. Some people would say weaknesses in family planning, but there's an astounding figure in Tanzania. 1 million Tanzanians are born every single year. So you have many young people, many children, but also many young adults, such as yourselves. So we are emphasizing youth because you now are being discussed almost as a development topic, just like we discuss climate change, just like we discuss health. Because there is a very important concept in development called the demographic dividend. And the demographic dividend is when a society has a large proportion of young people, just like almost all African countries. And if that economic power of these young people can be tapped, it can transform your society from a third world country into a middle income or even a high income country. So your role as young people in helping define the future is absolutely essential. Now, we must also remember that youth, having in a sense become a development topic, shouldn't be seen just as passive beneficiaries of development interventions. You need to be active participants of your own development process. So you must engage in programs that are multi-sectoral in nature. You must get involved with climate change, with health and nutrition, with gender equality, with peace and security. You must be, if you can, certainly a beneficiary of those programs. But more than that, an active participant, and even play leadership roles in helping define that agenda. And I would hope that you can also work with the UN on this work. It is a challenge for us in different UN agencies to work with youth. When youth are like 60% of a country, we obviously cannot work with everyone. We cannot work with all the young people in that country. But through different specialized agencies of the UN system, through UNIC, that has been supporting YUNA and UNA here in Tanzania, and hopefully in the other countries you represent, there are opportunities in which you can volunteer, in which you can be a resource person, in which you can be a participant in an activity. So we hope to build those bridges between the UN and young people. In fact, we really must build those links with all people. The Charter of the United Nations begins as we the peoples. And as we celebrate 70 years of the UN this year, we must always remember that the Charter started we the peoples. And the Charter started at the end of World War II, where 40 million people died. So we must remember that our connection to the people is important, and our connection to youth is important. Now, finally, a last set of points that I thought I could address are issues related to the post-2015 development agenda, which is, after all, the topic of your deliberations. There are so many things that we can actually talk about on the 2015 development agenda. I think the most significant way for me of putting it forward to you is to actually quote the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. He says that this is the first generation in world history that can actually eliminate absolute poverty in the world. But it is also the last generation that can actually prevent what could be a catastrophic process of global warming and climate change. So the next 15 years are extremely important. And as we look ahead, we must reflect on what this means. And in terms of the themes that you have chosen to discuss, clearly when we talk about ending poverty, we must talk about the issues that you've highlighted. We must talk about gender equality. We must talk about health and nutrition. We must talk about democratic processes that are inclusive. So it's essential that this broad agenda is looked at. And then when we look at climate change, we must look at issues of food security. We must look at issues of agricultural development. We must look at issues of employment in rural areas. So you actually have a very tall agenda before you. But I also understand that you're talking about peace and security, and I thought I would spend a few minutes on that. The world has seen a major change in the last couple of decades. When the UN was established, the principal cause of conflict was interstate conflict. Nowadays, the principal causes of conflict are intrastate conflict. This is what we see in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Somalia. And we know that processes of peace and security must be strongly linked to processes of development. So for those of you that will be discussing peace and security, you must remember there can be no security without development. But neither can there be development if you do not have security. So this is where the multi-sectoral approach of a model UN such as this one becomes so important for all of us. And then finally, I wanted to talk about one subject that is hugely important for the world community, for us here in Africa, and that is gender equality. The inequalities that exist between men and women are one of the biggest causes for underdevelopment in the world. You cannot have a society develop if 50% of its population is not a participant in that development process. So we must bring this 50% of the population into an equal status with men. Without that, I don't believe that the post-2015 development agenda, the SDGs, will be met. And it is you as young people, both men and women, that you have this responsibility to ensure that this equality can be achieved sooner than the 15 years of the SDGs, but if not, most certainly by 2030. So on that note, let me conclude. Let me thank you for the opportunity to be able to address you. It's really been a joy to be able to share some thoughts with you, and I wish you all the best in your event and I look forward maybe some other time to be with you in person. Asante en Tanzania, asanteni sana, kila laheri.